Sarah Chen stared at the stars through the viewport of the transport ship. 6 months ago, she was just another student at the Terran Naval Academy. Now she wore the uniform of a real officer in the human fleet. The silver bars on her collar felt heavy, like they carried all the hopes of Earth with them. The transport ship moved slowly through space toward Sentinel-7, the outer rim station that would be her new home. Sarah had been told this was a simple assignment. Guard duty, keep the peace. Make sure the supply ships got through safely. Nothing exciting ever happened out here in the empty space between stars. Sarah touched the datapad in her pocket. It held her orders and her service record. Top of her class at the academy. Perfect scores in space combat theory. But theory was very different from real combat. She had never fired a shot in anger. She had never seen an enemy ship except in training videos. The captain of the transport ship was an old man named Richards. He had been flying between the stars since before Sarah was born. His face was marked by years of space radiation, and his eyes held the tired look of someone who had seen too much. "First time out here, Commander?" Richards asked as he joined her at the viewport. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "I mean first time on active duty." Richards nodded slowly. "The rim is different from Earth. Out here you learn fast or you don't. Learn at all. The academy teaches you rules. Space doesn't care about rules." Sarah wanted to ask what he meant, but Richards had already walked away. She turned back to the stars and tried to imagine what her new life would be like. The transport ship arrived at Sentinel-7 3 days later. The station was huge, a metal city floating in the darkness. Ships came and went like busy insects, carrying supplies and people between the human colonies. Sarah watched them through the viewport and felt a mix of excitement and fear. Commander James Morrison met her at the airlock. He was a big man, with gray hair and calm eyes. Sarah had read about him in the fleet records. 20 years of service, veteran of the border wars. The kind of officer Sarah hoped to become someday. "Welcome to Sentinel-7, Commander Chen," Morrison said as they shook hands. "I hope you're ready to work. We have a convoy heading out to the Kepler system tomorrow, and I want you to learn our procedures." Sarah followed Morrison through the station corridors. The walls were covered with pipes and cables. The air smelled of metal and recycled oxygen. Everything looked worn but functional, like tools that had been used for many years. "The Kepler system is important," Morrison explained as they walked. 3 colonies, 2 mining stations, and about 50,000 people who depend on us for supplies. We send a convoy every 2 weeks. Usually nothing happens, but we stay ready just in case. They stopped at the command center, a room filled with screens and blinking lights. Officers sat at control stations, monitoring the space around the station. Everything looked calm and routine. "Just in case of what?" Sarah asked. Morrison's face became serious. "Pirates, mostly. Sometimes smugglers who don't want to pay taxes. The colonies are far from Earth, and that makes some people think they can do whatever they want." Sarah nodded, but she felt disappointed. She had joined the fleet to protect humanity from real threats, not to chase criminals and tax cheats. At the academy, her instructors had talked about the great dangers that waited in the darkness between stars. Alien empires with technology beyond human understanding. Ancient machines left behind by dead civilizations. The unknown threats that might come from the deep space beyond human borders. But here on Sentinel-7, the biggest worry was making sure supply ships didn't get robbed. The next morning, Sarah stood in the briefing room with the other officers who would escort the convoy. There were 12 ships in total. 8 cargo vessels filled with food, medicine, and equipment. 4 military ships to protect them. The military ships were old but well-maintained. Sarah looked at their specifications and felt proud to be part of something important. Morrison stood at the front of the room with a holographic display showing their route to the Kepler system. "Standard procedure," he said. "We jump to the edge of the system, form up around the cargo ships, and escort them to each colony. The whole trip should take 6 days." Sarah studied the route carefully. It looked simple enough. "Follow the shipping lanes, stay in formation, watch the sensors for trouble." "Any questions?" Morrison asked. Sarah raised her hand. "What if we encounter something more serious than pirates?" Some of the other officers smiled at her question. Morrison's expression didn't change. Like what, Commander? I don't know, Sarah said. Alien raiders. A military force from outside. Human space. Something we weren't expecting. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. The galaxy is a big place, Commander Chen. There are things out there we don't understand. But in 20 years of service, I've learned that most problems have simple solutions. Stay alert. Follow procedure. Don't look for trouble where none exists. The convoy left Sentinel-7 6 hours later. Sarah sat in the command chair of the escort ship Defiant, watching the cargo vessels form up around her. Everything went exactly as planned. The ships moved into formation. The sensors showed clear space in all directions. The first jump to hyperspace went perfectly. For 3 days, nothing happened. The convoy moved through empty space toward the Kepler system. Sarah spent her time learning the ship's systems and getting to know her crew. They were good people, experienced, and professional. But she could see in their eyes that they thought she was too young, too new, too eager. On the 4th day, everything changed. Sarah was in her cabin, reading reports when the alarm sounded. She ran to the command bridge and found her communications. Officer Lieutenant Torres, staring at his screen with a confused expression. What is it? Sarah asked. Message from Commander Morrison, Torres said. He's asking for you to take command of the convoy. Sarah felt the world spin around her. What? Why? Torres played the message. Morrison's face appeared on the screen, but he looked wrong. His skin was pale and he was breathing hard. Commander Chen. Morrison's voice was weak. I'm having chest pains. Heart attack, I think. My medical officer says I need immediate surgery. You're the ranking officer. Now, take command of the convoy and complete the mission. The message ended. Sarah stared at the blank screen and tried to understand what had just happened. She was in command now. 4 military ships, 8 cargo vessels, and 300 people were her responsibility. Ma'am, Torres said quietly. The other ships are asking for orders. Sarah looked around the bridge. Her crew was watching her, waiting to see what she would do. She was 24 years old, 6 months out of the academy. She had never commanded anything more important than a training exercise, but she was all they had. Signal all ships, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm taking command of the convoy. Maintain course and formation. We complete the mission. As Torres sent the message, Sarah sat in the command chair and looked at the star charts. The Kepler system was still 2 days away. She told herself that nothing would go wrong. This was a routine supply run. The most dangerous thing they were likely to encounter was a broken navigation computer. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow, long-range sensors would detect 300 alien warships heading straight toward human space, and she had no way of knowing that in less than a week, she would either be dead or famous throughout the galaxy. The alarm woke Sarah from a deep sleep. She had been dreaming about the academy, about safe classrooms and training simulations that always ended with everyone going home. The sound of the emergency signal brought her back to reality with a shock that made her heart race. Sarah ran to the bridge in her sleep clothes, not caring how she looked. Lieutenant Torres was already at his station, his face lit by the glow of multiple screens. The expression on his face told Sarah everything she needed to know. This was not a drill. Report, Sarah said as she dropped into the command chair. Long-range sensors picked up multiple contacts, Torres said. His voice was calm, but Sarah could hear the fear underneath. 300 ships approaching from outside the system. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. 300 ships was more than the entire human fleet, more than any pirate group could possibly have. This was something else entirely. Show me, she said. The main screen lit up with a tactical display. Sarah could see the convoy, 12 small dots moving slowly toward the Kepler system, and approaching from the edge of the system, a red cloud that represented more enemy ships than Sarah had ever imagined in her worst nightmares. Computer analysis shows they're using technology we don't recognize, Torres continued. Energy. Signatures are unlike anything in our database. Estimate time to intercept, 18 hours. Sarah stared at the screen and tried to think. At the Academy, they had studied every known threat to human space. Pirates used stolen human ships. The few alien species humanity had encountered were either friendly or too primitive to be dangerous. But this fleet was something new. Signal all ships, Sarah said. Emergency formation. All cargo vessels to the center. Military escorts form a defensive perimeter. Ma'am, said her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim. Should we send a message? To Sentinel-7? Request reinforcements? Sarah looked at the numbers again. Even if Sentinel-7 sent every ship they had, it would take them 3 days to reach the convoy. By then, it would all be over. Send the message, Sarah said, but don't wait for an answer. As her crew worked to reorganize the convoy, Sarah accessed the ship's database and began reading everything she could find about alien contact protocols. Most of it was theoretical. Humanity had always assumed that first contact with a hostile alien species would happen near Earth, where the main fleet could respond. No one had planned for this situation. The alien fleet continued to approach. Long-range scans revealed ships that were larger and more advanced than anything humans had built. Their energy shields glowed like miniature suns. Their weapons systems were beyond human understanding. Sarah called a meeting with the other ship commanders. The 4 military vessels were small by fleet standards, but they represented the best technology humanity had to offer. The UEF Defiant, which Sarah commanded. The UEF Ranger, captained by the veteran officer Marcus Webb. The UEF Sentinel, under Captain Lisa Park. And the UEF Guardian, commanded by the youngest officer besides Sarah, Captain David Cross. The meeting took place over video link. Sarah looked at the faces of her fellow commanders and saw the same fear she felt reflected in their eyes. Options? Sarah asked. Captain Webb spoke first. He was 50 years old and had more combat experience than the rest of them combined. We run, get the cargo ships to hyperspace and head back to human territory. Hope the aliens don't follow. They're faster than us, Captain Park pointed out. Long-range scans show they can match our best speed. If we run, they'll catch us in open space with no cover and no options. Captain Cross cleared his throat. What about the colonies in the Kepler system? 50,000 people. If we lead this alien fleet toward them. We can't protect the colonies with 4 ships, Webb said. Better to save what we can. Sarah listened to the discussion and felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. Every choice led to disaster. Fight and die quickly. Run and die slowly. Either way, people would die because of decisions she made. She thought about her classes at the Academy. Advanced combat theory, asymmetric warfare, the art of war. All those lessons seemed useless now, faced with an enemy that had more ships than she had missiles. But then she remembered something. A paper she had written in her final year. A theoretical study of how a small force might defeat a larger one. Her instructors had called it interesting but impractical. Real combat, they said, was about matching force with force. Sarah pulled up her old Academy files and found the paper. Asymmetric warfare in 3-dimensional combat spaces. She had spent months working on it, exploring every historical example of small forces defeating large ones. David and Goliath, the Battle of Thermopylae, guerrilla warfare in the jungles of Earth. The key was never to fight the enemy's strength, always attack their weakness. I need detailed scans of their formation, Sarah said suddenly. The other commanders looked at her with surprise. Ma'am, Captain Webb said, their ships. How are they arranged? What does their formation tell us about their tactics? Captain Park accessed her sensor data. They're in a tight formation, ships grouped by size. The largest vessels in the center, smaller ones in concentric rings around them. Very organized, very precise. Sarah felt excitement building in her chest. They fight like a parade, she said. Perfect formation. Every ship in its proper place. This is how they've always fought, and it's always worked for them. What are you thinking? Captain Cross asked. Sarah looked at the tactical display again, but now she saw something different. Instead of an overwhelming enemy force, she saw a formation that had never been tested, ships that had never faced an enemy willing to break the rules of civilized warfare. Humans don't fight in formation, Sarah said. We're chaotic, unpredictable. At the academy, they always told us that was a weakness. But what if it's actually a strength? She began entering commands into the tactical computer. Look at this. Their formation assumes we'll meet them head-on, ship to ship, formation against formation. But what if we don't? Sarah's plan began to take shape on the screen. Instead of meeting the alien fleet in open space, she would use the asteroid belt around Kepler-4. The rocks and debris would break up their perfect formation, force them to fight as individual ships instead of a coordinated fleet. It's crazy, Captain Webb said after Sarah explained her idea. It's suicide, Captain Park added. Captain Cross was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. It might actually work. Sarah looked at each of her fellow commanders. I won't order anyone to follow me. This isn't a plan that came from Fleet Command. It's not in any manual. If we do this and it goes wrong, we'll all be dead and there won't be anyone left to blame us for making the wrong choice. And if we don't do this? Captain Webb asked. Sarah gestured to the display showing the approaching alien fleet. We die anyway. At least this way, we die fighting. One by one, her commanders agreed to the plan. Sarah felt a mix of pride and terror as they began to prepare. In 6 hours, she would either prove that human unpredictability could defeat alien superiority, or she would get everyone under her command killed. The convoy changed course, heading for the asteroid belt around Kepler-4. Sarah spent the remaining time studying every detail of the alien formation, looking for weaknesses and planning her attack. She thought about her instructors at the academy, and wondered what they would say if they knew that their worst student was about to test theories that had never been tried in real combat. As the alien fleet drew closer, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Defiant and watched the asteroids grow larger on the screen. Rocks and ice, debris from the formation of the Kepler system. In a few hours, this empty space would become a battlefield. Sarah had no way of knowing if her plan would work, but she knew one thing for certain. The aliens had never fought humans before. They had no idea what they were about to face. The first battle changed everything. Sarah watched from the bridge of the Defiant as the alien fleet entered the asteroid belt. Their perfect formation began to break apart almost immediately. Ships that had maintained precise distances in open space now had to navigate around floating rocks the size of buildings. Their neat formations became ragged lines, then scattered groups, then individual vessels picking their way through the debris. All ships, attack pattern Delta, Sarah commanded into her communication system. Remember, hit and run. Don't stay in one place long enough for them to target you. The 4 human ships dove into the asteroid field like sharks attacking a school of fish. They were smaller and more maneuverable than the alien vessels. They could twist between asteroids where the larger ships couldn't follow. They could hide behind rocks, pop out to fire, then disappear again. The UEF Ranger, under Captain Webb's command, struck first. It emerged from behind a spinning asteroid and fired a full spread of missiles at an alien cruiser. The missiles slammed into the alien ship's shields, which flared bright blue and held. But the impact sent the cruiser spinning into an asteroid, and Sarah heard Webb's voice over the radio. Their shields are strong, but they don't handle impacts well. The collision damaged their hull. Sarah felt a surge of hope. The aliens had better technology, but they weren't used to fighting in chaotic environments. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not physical impacts with solid objects. All ships, new targeting priority, Sarah ordered. Don't try to punch through their shields. Use the asteroids. Ram them into the rocks. The human ships began a deadly game of 3-dimensional billiards using precise missile strikes to send alien vessels crashing into asteroids. The aliens tried to adapt, but their large ships were clumsy in the debris field. They couldn't match the humans' ability to dart between rocks and strike from unexpected angles. The first alien ship died when Captain Park drove it into a kilometer-wide asteroid at high speed. The impact crushed the ship's hull like a tin can. Sarah watched the explosion on her tactical display and felt a mixture of triumph and horror. Real people had just died because of her orders, but there was no time to think about that. The aliens were adapting faster than Sarah had hoped. They were learning to use their superior numbers to surround human ships, forcing them out of the asteroid field and into open space where they could be destroyed. The UEF Sentinel was the first human ship to die. Captain Park tried to repeat her earlier success, but the aliens had learned to watch for ramming attacks. 3 alien destroyers caught the Sentinel between them and fired at the same time. Park's ship disappeared in a ball of plasma. "Sentinel is gone," Captain Cross reported, his voice tight with emotion. Sarah felt the loss like a physical blow. Lisa Park had been a good officer and a decent person. She had died following Sarah's orders, trusting in a plan that might not work. But the plan was working, at least partially. 7 alien ships were destroyed or disabled, scattered among the asteroids like broken toys. The problem was that Sarah's force was being whittled down even faster. She had started with 4 ships. Now she had 3. "We need to change tactics," Captain Webb said, over the communication system. "They're learning too fast. In an hour, they'll figure out how to counter everything we're doing." Sarah stared at the tactical display and tried to think. The alien fleet had lost only a small fraction of its ships, but something had changed in their behavior. They were no longer advancing in their perfect formation. They were being more cautious, taking time to scan for threats before moving forward. That gave Sarah an idea. "All ships fall back to Rally Point Alpha," she ordered. "Prepare for Phase 2. Rally Point Alpha was a large asteroid that Sarah had selected as a fallback position. It was riddled with caves and tunnels, carved out by mining operations years ago. The 3 surviving human ships disappeared into the tunnels like submarines diving beneath the waves. The alien fleet approached the asteroid cautiously. Their sensors could detect the human ships inside the rock, but they couldn't get a clear, targeting solution. The asteroids and metal deposits interfered with their scanning systems. Sarah waited until the alien ships were clustered around the asteroid, trying to figure out how to dig the humans out of their hiding place. Then she triggered the explosives. Sarah had spent the time during their retreat placing mining charges throughout the asteroid. When they detonated, the entire rock broke apart in a chain reaction of explosions. Chunks of stone and metal flew out like shrapnel from a gigantic grenade. 16 alien ships were caught in the blast. Their shields, designed to stop energy, weapons couldn't handle the impacts from thousands of flying rocks. Ships cracked open like eggs. Atmosphere vented into space in glittering clouds of frozen air. The human ships rode the explosion outward, using the blast to propel them toward the scattered alien vessels. They fired everything they had at the confused and damaged enemy ships, then disappeared back into the asteroid field before the aliens could respond. When the chaos settled, 23 alien ships had been destroyed or disabled. The exchange rate was better than Sarah had dared hope, but it had cost her another ship. The UEF Guardian, commanded by Captain Cross, had been caught by debris from the explosion. The young captain's last message was a simple "good luck." Sarah now commanded 2 ships against an enemy fleet that still numbered more than 200 vessels. By any reasonable calculation, the battle was hopeless. The aliens would eventually overwhelm her remaining forces through sheer numbers, but something else was happening. Sarah could see it in the way the alien ships moved. They were no longer advancing with confidence. They were hesitant, uncertain, afraid. "They've never lost before," Sarah realized, speaking aloud to her bridge crew. "In all their history, they've never encountered an enemy that could hurt them. They don't know how to handle casualties." Lieutenant Torres looked up from his sensor station. "Ma'am, we're getting strange readings from their command ship. Lots of radio chatter. It sounds like arguing." Sarah smiled grimly. The aliens were having the same problem every military force faced when a simple battle turned into something complicated. The field commanders wanted to adapt tactics to deal with the unexpected threat. The high command wanted to stick with the plan that had always worked before. While the aliens argued among themselves, Sarah prepared for the next phase of her defense. She couldn't win a straight fight, but she didn't need to win. She just needed to make the cost of victory too high for the aliens to accept. Sarah opened a communication channel to all frequencies. If the aliens were listening, they would hear her message. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet," she said, making her voice as calm and confident as possible. "You are invading human space without provocation. You have already suffered significant losses. I offer you one chance to withdraw peacefully. If you continue your attack, I will destroy your entire fleet." The response came back in accented but understandable English. "Human Commander, you have fought well, but your situation is hopeless. We are the hegemony. We have conquered 100 worlds. Surrender now and your colonies will be spared." Sarah looked at the tactical display. 2 human ships against more than 200 alien vessels. By any logical analysis, the hegemony commander was right. The situation was hopeless. But Sarah had stopped thinking logically hours ago. She was thinking like a human now, which meant she was thinking about things the aliens couldn't understand. Pride, stubbornness, the refusal to accept that something was impossible just because the numbers said so. "Counteroffer," Sarah replied. "You have 1 hour to leave human space. After that, I stop playing games and show you what humans do when we get serious." She cut the communication channel before the alien commander could respond. On the bridge of the Defiant, her crew stared at her with expressions that mixed admiration with the certainty that their captain had lost her mind. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Kim said carefully, "what exactly do we do if they don't retreat?" Sarah looked at the star charts and began planning her next move. She thought about everything she had learned at the academy, everything she had read about asymmetric warfare, everything she knew about human nature and the psychology of combat. "We do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds," Sarah said. "We cheat." The hour passed like a countdown to the end of the world. Sarah spent the time preparing her final gambit while the alien fleet reorganized itself outside the asteroid belt. They had learned from their earlier losses. Now they approached in smaller groups, using their sensors more carefully, ready for human tricks. But Sarah wasn't planning to fight them in the asteroid belt again. Her next battlefield would be the Kepler system itself, and she would use every dirty trick she could think of. "Signal the colonies," Sarah ordered. "Emergency evacuation protocol. All civilian ships to clear orbital space immediately." "Ma'am," Lieutenant Torres said, "there are over 50,000 people in the colonies. They can't evacuate everyone in time." "They don't need to evacuate everyone," Sarah replied. "Just get the ships out of orbit. I need clear space to work." As the colony ships scattered toward the outer system, Sarah moved her 2 remaining vessels toward Kepler 4, the largest planet in the system. It was a gas giant with rings of ice and rock plus 17 moons. Sarah had studied the system carefully during the journey from Sentinel-7, but now she was seeing it with new eyes. Not as a destination for cargo deliveries, but as a weapon. The alien fleet followed her, maintaining their careful distance. They had learned to respect human unpredictability, but they still had overwhelming numerical superiority. Sarah counted 150 ships, still more than enough to destroy her forces and continue on to conquer the human colonies. Sarah's communication system crackled with an incoming message from the hegemony commander. "Human vessels, your hour has expired. Surrender now, or be destroyed." "Sorry," Sarah replied. "I'm kind of busy right now. Can I get back to you in a few minutes?" She cut the channel before the alien could respond and focused on her navigation display. Timing would be everything for what she planned to do next. The UEF Defiant and the UEF Ranger dove toward Kepler 4 at maximum speed, with the alien fleet in pursuit. Sarah had programmed a complex flight path that would take them through the planet's ring system, around several moons, and finally into orbit around the gas giant itself. "Ma'am," her navigator said nervously, "this course is going to take us very close to the rings. If we hit debris at this speed—" "Trust me," Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure she trusted herself. The chase through the Kepler system became a deadly game of follow the leader. Sarah's ships twisted between moons and slingshot around gravitational fields, using every trick of space navigation to stay ahead of the pursuing aliens. The larger alien vessels had trouble matching the humans' maneuvering, but they didn't need to catch up. They just needed to corner the humans in open space. That was exactly what Sarah was counting on. As her ships approached Kepler 4, Sarah activated a communication system that broadcast on all frequencies throughout the system. But instead of talking to the aliens, she was talking to something else entirely. Colony Mining Control, this is Commander Chen. Emergency authorization. Omega 7. Activate all automated mining platforms immediately. Throughout the Kepler system, dozens of robotic mining stations came online. They had been waiting in standby mode, invisible to the alien sensors that were focused on tracking the human warships. Now they powered up and began moving toward predetermined positions. The aliens noticed the mining platforms almost immediately, but dismissed them as non-threats. The platforms were industrial equipment, not weapons. They had no shields, no armor, no missile systems. But they did have something else. They had massive industrial cutting lasers designed to slice apart asteroids, and they had nuclear power, plants that could be overloaded to create very large explosions. All mining platforms, target coordinates transmitted, Sarah said into her communicator. Begin cutting operations. The aliens suddenly found themselves surrounded by what looked like a swarm of robotic bees. The mining platforms darted between alien ships, slicing at hull plating with their industrial lasers. The aliens' energy shields were useless against the close-range cutting beams, which were designed to work on solid matter rather than energy weapons. More importantly, the mining platforms created chaos in the alien formation. Ships broke ranks to avoid the darting robots. Captains lost sight of their squadron leaders in the confusion. The hegemony's carefully planned attack dissolved into dozens of individual ship actions. Sarah used the confusion to spring her next trap. Hidden throughout the system were the cargo containers from supply runs over the past several months. Sarah had secretly modified them with remote detonators and hidden them among the asteroids and debris fields. Now she triggered them all at once. Explosions bloomed throughout the system like deadly fireworks. Alien ships found themselves flying through clouds of shrapnel and debris. Some were damaged by direct impacts. Others were forced off course as they tried to avoid the flying wreckage. But Sarah's most effective weapon wasn't the mining platforms or the hidden explosives. It was psychological warfare. Attention, Hegemony Fleet, she broadcast on all frequencies. You are now surrounded by over 1,000 automated defense platforms. Each platform is equipped with nuclear warheads and programmed to ram any ship that does not immediately retreat from this system. You have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal. It was a complete lie. Sarah had maybe 50 mining platforms, and none of them had nuclear warheads, but the aliens had no way to know that. All they could see were dozens of robot vehicles, swarming around their ships and explosions going off throughout the system. More importantly, they had never encountered an enemy that lied to them. In all their previous conquests, the hegemony had faced enemies that fought with honor, that followed the accepted rules of civilized warfare. The idea that an enemy commander would deliberately deceive them was outside their experience. Some alien ships began to pull back. Others continued to advance. The result was that the hegemony fleet broke into two groups, with neither group sure what the other was doing. Sarah exploited the confusion by launching her final attack. The UEF, Defiant and UEF Ranger had reached orbit around Kepler 4, where Sarah had been secretly hoping to find what she needed. The gas giant had powerful magnetic fields and radiation belts, similar to Jupiter and Earth's solar system. All ships, emergency power to shields, Sarah ordered. We're going into the radiation belt. Her ships dove into the planet's magnetic field, where the radiation was intense enough to disrupt electronic systems but not quite strong enough to kill her crew immediately. The alien ships followed, but their more advanced electronics were actually more vulnerable to the electromagnetic interference. Sarah had one more trick prepared. She had been monitoring solar activity throughout the system, and she knew that Kepler's star was about to produce a particularly strong solar flare. The radiation from the flare would interact with the planet's magnetic field to create an electromagnetic pulse that would temporarily disable electronic systems throughout the area. "All hands prepare for electromagnetic pulse," Sarah announced. "Emergency power to backup systems." The solar flare hit exactly on schedule. The electromagnetic pulse spread through the system like an invisible wave, shorting out electronic systems on every ship in the area. But Sarah's ships were ready for it. Human technology had always been more primitive than alien technology, which meant it was also more resistant to electromagnetic interference. The alien ships, with their advanced computer systems and energy weapons, were completely disabled. For 10 minutes, the alien fleet drifted helplessly in space while their systems rebooted. That gave Sarah enough time to position her ships for maximum effect and target the most important enemy vessels. When the alien systems came back online, they found themselves facing a situation that had never happened before in hegemony history. 30 of their ships had been destroyed while they were helpless. Others were damaged or scattered throughout the system. More importantly, their formation was completely broken. Ships that had operated as a coordinated fleet for decades were now scattered individual vessels, each trying to figure out what was happening and what orders they should be following. Sarah looked at her tactical display and realized that she had achieved something impossible. The mighty hegemony Armada, which had conquered 100 worlds, was retreating in confusion from 2 human ships and a handful of mining robots. But the battle wasn't over yet. The aliens still outnumbered her by more than 50 to 1, and they were beginning to regroup. Sarah had won this round through surprise and deception, but those advantages wouldn't work twice. For her next move, she would need to do something that no human commander had ever attempted before. She would need to defeat the aliens' flagship in single combat and convince them that humanity was too dangerous to conquer. The hegemony flagship was a monster. Sarah stared at it through the viewport of the Defiant and tried not to think about how outmatched she was. The alien ship was 3 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could crack planets, and protected by shields that had never been penetrated in 200 years of conquest. Sarah's ship was a patrol vessel designed to chase pirates. In a fair fight, the flagship would destroy her in seconds. So Sarah had no intention of fighting fair. "Signal the Ranger," she told Lieutenant Torres. "Captain Webb is to maintain position at the edge of the system. If this goes wrong, he's to return to Earth and warn the fleet." "Ma'am," Torres said quietly. "Captain Webb is requesting permission to assist in the attack." Sarah shook her head. "Tell him this is a direct order. 1 ship might be able to do what I'm planning. 2 ships will just get in each other's way." As Torres sent the message, Sarah activated the communication system and broadcast on all frequencies. She wanted every ship in both fleets to hear what she said next. "Hegemony flagship, this is Commander Sarah Chen. I challenge you to single combat. Ship to ship, commander to commander. If you win, my remaining forces will surrender and your fleet can proceed to conquer human space. If I win, your entire armada retreats and never returns." The response came back immediately in the same accented English she had heard before. "Human commander, you are either very brave or very foolish. I am Fleet Commander Zaxxon of the Hegemony. I have conquered 17 star systems and commanded 1,000 battles. Do you really think your small ship can defeat my flagship?" "There's only one way to find out," Sarah replied. What Sarah didn't tell the alien commander was that she had been studying his ship's design for the past hour, looking for weaknesses. The Hegemony built their vessels like floating cities with massive hulls designed to carry enormous weapons and shield generators. But that size came with disadvantages. The flagship was powerful but slow. It was heavily armored but not very maneuverable. Most importantly, its weapons were designed to destroy other large ships at long range. The aliens had never needed point defense systems because no enemy had ever been crazy enough to get close to their flagships. Sarah was about to become the first. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's internal communication system. "We're about to do something that's never been tried before. I won't lie to you. Our chances of survival are not good, but if we succeed, we'll save billions of human lives and show the galaxy that humanity will never surrender to tyranny." Sarah paused, thinking about the crew members who were trusting her with their lives. Good people who had signed up to protect. Earth and her colonies. They deserve to know the truth. If anyone wants to transfer to the escape pods, now is the time. No one will think less of you for making that choice. She waited 5 minutes. No one left their station. Then let's show these aliens what humans can do, Sarah said. The UEF Defiant accelerated toward the Hegemony flagship at maximum speed. Sarah had programmed an erratic flight path, weaving back and forth to make herself a difficult target. The flagship's main weapons tried to track her, but they were too slow to follow her rapid changes in direction. Smaller weapons opened fire as Sarah got closer. Energy beams and missile swarms filled the space around her ship. Her shields flared as they absorbed hits, and damage reports began flooding in from all over the ship. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported her damage control officer. "Sealing emergency bulkheads. Shield generators operating at 60% efficiency," called out Lieutenant Kim from the tactical station. Sarah ignored the damage reports and focused on her flying. She was threading the needle between energy beams that could vaporize her ship. Using every trick of space combat she had learned at the Academy, the flagship grew larger and larger on her screen until it filled the entire viewport. At the last possible second, Sarah triggered her main engines and dove beneath the alien ship's hull. The flagship's weapons couldn't depress far enough to track her. For a few precious moments, she was in a blind spot directly underneath the enemy vessel. Sarah activated her ship's mining charges, the same type of explosives she had used to destroy the asteroid earlier in the battle. But instead of setting them to explode immediately, she programmed them with magnetic clamps and ejected them against the flagship's hull. The Defiant raced along the length of the enormous ship, dropping explosive charges like seeds. Sarah could see the alien crew through transparent sections of the hull, running to emergency stations as alarms sounded throughout their ship. "Charges deployed," Lieutenant Kim reported. "All systems ready for emergency acceleration." Sarah pulled the Defiant up and away from the flagship, just as the mining charges detonated. The explosions weren't powerful enough to destroy the massive ship, but they didn't need to be. They created hull breaches that vented atmosphere and disabled key systems. More importantly, they damaged the flagship's main shield generator. "Shield strength down to 40%, Torres reported, reading the sensor data. Sarah smiled grimly. The flagship was still functional, but now it was vulnerable. She began her second attack run, this time targeting the ship's weapon systems. The Hegemony crew had learned from her first attack. Point defense guns that hadn't been used in centuries came online, filling the space around their ship with defensive fire. Sarah found herself flying through a storm of energy beams and explosive shells. Her ship shuddered under multiple impacts. Warning lights flashed across every control panel. The artificial gravity fluctuated, making her stomach lurch as she fought to control the ship. "Engines at 50%, her engineer reported. "We've lost 2 missile tubes and the forward sensor array." Sarah gritted her teeth and continued her attack. She fired everything she had at the flagship's weapon systems, using precision strikes to disable the aliens' ability to fight back. It was like performing surgery with a sledgehammer, but gradually the flagship's return fire began to weaken. That was when Fleet Commander Zaxxon made his mistake. Instead of trying to escape or calling for help from his escort ships, the alien commander decided to ram Sarah's vessel. The flagship turned toward the Defiant and accelerated, trying to crush the smaller ship with its massive bulk. Sarah had been hoping he would do exactly that. She waited until the flagship was committed to its ramming course, then fired her engines at maximum power and dove toward Kepler 4. The flagship followed, gaining speed as both ships fell toward the gas giant's gravity well. "Ma'am," her navigator said urgently, "if we continue on this course, we won't be able to pull out of the planet's gravity well. We'll crash into the atmosphere." "I know," Sarah said calmly. She led the flagship deeper into the planet's gravity well, using the ship's magnetic field to charge her remaining weapons. The aliens followed, determined to destroy the small human vessel that had humiliated their mighty fleet. At the last possible moment, Sarah triggered her final gambit. Instead of trying to escape the planet's gravity, she used it. The Defiant slingshot around Kepler 4, using gravitational acceleration to boost her speed beyond anything the ship's engines could achieve. The flagship tried to follow the same maneuver, but it was too large and too clumsy. The massive ship's hull began to buckle under the stress of the high-gravity turn. Internal systems failed as the acceleration exceeded the ship's design limits. Sarah used her gravitational boost to position herself above the crippled flagship and fired her last missiles directly into the alien ship's main reactor. The explosion lit up the entire system like a second sun. When the light faded, the Hegemony flagship was gone. Fleet Commander Zaxxon and his crew had died in the nuclear fire of their own ship's destruction. Sarah opened a communication channel to the remaining alien fleet. Her ship was battered and barely functional, but she was still alive. "This is Commander Chen," she said, making her voice as steady as possible. "Your flagship has been destroyed, and your commander is dead. I repeat, my offer. Withdraw from human space now, or face the same fate as your leader." For a long moment there was silence on the communication channels. Then a new voice responded, speaking in the same accented English, but with a tone Sarah had never heard from the aliens before. "Fear. Human Commander, this is Subcommander Vex. We did not expect such resistance. The Hegemony has never suffered such losses. Perhaps we have made an error in targeting your species." Sarah felt a surge of triumph, but she kept her voice calm. "The error was thinking that humans would submit to conquest. We don't surrender. We don't give up. And we don't forgive attacks on our people. What are your terms for our withdrawal?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. She had won an impossible victory, but she was still vastly outnumbered. If the aliens realized how damaged her ship was, they might decide to continue the fight. "Complete withdrawal from human space," she said. "Your fleet will return to Hegemony territory and never again approach any human world. In exchange, I will allow you to leave peacefully and tend to your wounded." "And if we refuse?" Sarah looked at her tactical display. The UEF Ranger was still waiting at the edge of the system. A few mining platforms were still operational. The alien fleet had been reduced to less than 100 ships, many of them damaged.